two legal cases that are in other states in the country, but I think are important enough that we should be talking about it here on the show. I love having lawyers on the show, and I'm very excited to, for the first time, welcome Keith No, who is a partner at Lando and Anastasi, for joining me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, AJ. Pleasure being with you.
All right, LAlaw.com if anyone wants to learn more about them. I've had Peter Lando, who's a partner over there, on the show previously to talk about business law, but we're going to talk about some very different things. I personally, my theory is these are both stemming from the COVID situation really is what led to some of these conclusions coming through, but this is me jumping ahead. But let's start off with this first case coming out of Montana, where some youths had a landmark climate decision where, Mr. Lawyer, can you break it down easily?
I don't know if I can break it down easily, but it basically what they're claiming is that their rights are infringed based on the conduct of the government with respect to climate. And so I've only I haven't read the pleadings. I haven't read the decision. I've read the articles that have been written about it. And my takeaway is I agree with the state. The state, well, first of all, my first concern was, how do these people have standing? I mean, yeah. How do they have standing, and how in the world are they damaged? What is their damage? And
to break that down, I mean, that's an important thing. If you bring a case to court, you need to show some sort of damages that took place against you, not future you that hasn't experienced any catastrophe yet, per se.
Right, exactly. And I agree with the state's response to this. Basically, they were telling the court, this is a legislative issue. This isn't a judicial issue. And, it's part and parcel. You see it all the time with these type of lawsuits. You're going to see lots of copycats. And, the climate change, I think you and I talked about my feelings about climate change. I'm a conservationist, if they change their narrative more towards conservation than towards what they're, this whole climate change in the earth is boiling and we're all going to die in 12 years. If you go back to the last 20 years on their predictions, they're all absolutely wrong, right? Yeah. If they bought us in on a conservation and they had a plan, if they said, okay, we want to increase electric vehicles, let's go and develop infrastructure. We're going to put online 25 new nuclear power plants, and we're going to have a network of charging stations. And by, some year, we're going to have so many electric vehicles. I could sort of buy into that. But my cynical reaction is this is just a wealth transfer gimmick, this whole climate change. And unfortunately, I think with this ruling, we're going to be seeing lots of copycats. And unfortunately, we're going to need some brave judges on the appellate and Supreme Court level to strike these down, because they're really dangerous. And they give, I don't even know what the reward should be or what the remedy is to what the plaintiffs are asking for. It baffles my mind, but it's scary. It's scary. And you see it, that side of the fence, they don't stop until they win, right?
Yeah.
And this is an example of it.
Yeah, the case is Held v. Montana, which I'll link in the episode description, in the YouTube description. I definitely suggest you check out this article from the Washington Post, which, entertainingly enough, was written by she's a reporting intern for climate and environment, which is hilarious on its face that this is the person they have write this supposed landmark case that's going to be changing the future. Oh, we just sent the intern to go write it? You're not making a great case for yourself there, for starters, from a journalistic standpoint. But from a legal standpoint, I mean, if you say you cannot allow coal energy production because me in 20 years is going to experience maybe we'll get flooded. Maybe Montana will be underwater, even though it's up in the mountains. But we're going to pretend that's not a situation that we're going to deal with right at the moment. It doesn't make any sense. Like, I think when you state that it makes sense from a legislative standpoint, yeah, maybe you have a very energetic House that wants to go full bore with some restrictions when it comes to it. Yeah, but that's the democratic process instead of abusing the court system.
That's a great point. I mean, I think I shared with you, the two greatest things to bring people out of poverty are capitalism and fossil fuels, like it or not.
Yeah.
And limiting the ability to take advantage of our great gift of natural resource and fossil fuels is really going to place people into poverty. I think it's going to achieve the exact opposite of what they think they're going to get out of it. And there's so many things that are tangential to it. Guess what plastics are made out of?
Yeah.
Guess how plastics affect our life on it's incalculable. Our daily lives are so impacted on our ability to produce and manufacture products that have plastics in it. Like I said, I think earlier, they just haven't thought it through. And if it was more of a conservation, it was more of a united plan to be a little more conservative, to conserve our natural resources, I'm all for that. I think most people are. But you got some very elite people getting phenomenally wealthy off of this movement. And then we're poisoning the minds of young people where they're, contemplating that they can't have children because they're afraid what their child's going to live like 20 years from now, when every prediction they have is wrong. And, the world isn't a perfect place, but their kid's going to be all right if they don't have lunatic parents. I mean,
Yeah, and this going back to what I was originally saying before we dove in this case specifically, my theory across these two cases, I think especially from the left, the approach that's being taken to these protective laws is the way they try and phrase it, the ability to bypass what people's rights with regards to having energy, having guns, which will be the next
Absolutely.
case. It seems there's this common theme you're seeing with these activist movements where it's your ability to do something will impact me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's so true. It ultimately it will impinge on our personal rights. We've already seen it. We've seen it with not only look at. I was just reading an article the other day. I don't know if you heard this. The fan industry, the fan industry. Apparently, fans run off, and I'm going to get the numbers wrong, 5 amps of energy. Well, that is too much for the climate alarmists. They want to change all fans to have a maximum of like a 2.5 or a 3 amp motor. And so this is immediately 40% of all fan companies are going to go out of business because they won't be able to comply with it. This is federal regulation, mind you. And they just not a lot of thought. We've read articles about gas stoves and things like that. It is personal rights. It's your freedom. It's your liberty. It's your ability. It's the ability for the marketplace to kind of weigh out what are good ideas for consumers and what are bad ideas. And you don't need a Leviathan federal government making regulation. We need less regulations instead of more regulations. But unfortunately, they don't, they're, I hate to say it, I think we're going to see more of this rather than less of this going on.
Yeah, it's totally, your freedom to not wear a mask is impeding my ability to not be sick, to taken to the nth degree over and over again, and it boggles the mind how they don't consider the consequences of doing things like that, especially your fan examples. Disturbing and hilarious all at the same time. I mean, you figure the heat waves that we keep hearing about that are catastrophic and generation ending over in Europe and such. Like, I think we want some circulation. I like to know how many amps our AC units are, because you know that the fans are just going to be the first step before they go over to AC units, which are, guess what? It was 100 degrees in New Hampshire. I could not imagine being in damn Arizona or Florida or something like that, trying to deal with energy efficient circulation methods, let alone the silly. Think back to when LED bulbs first started coming on the scene. It's yeah. Someday, you may be able to have a proper product like these lights around me are LEDs, but a decade ago they were garbage.
Right. Oh, they're horrible, and we had a brief reprieve actually through the prior administration. We incandescent bulbs were back on the market, and love them. Soft light, not the right.
Yeah.
The other thing in the article, I think it was in the article, I'm not sure, or I read it somewhere else. It's moving the deck chairs on the Titanic, right? Yeah. With the fan, because the article said that like a typical water heater produces like 500 times more, or consumes 500 times more energy than a normal fan, operating fan in someone's room.
It's like you have other appliances. It's like some some guy that happened to work in the fan industry was mad about it. Or some politicians, like politicians get wild hairs up their ass occasionally, where now they're obsessed over this little thing. It just seemed to me like this is one of those situations. Oh my God! Let's jump over to this other story here. This is from New Hampshire Journal, which I'll also put in the episode description. New Mexico Democrat governor issues gun ban. Could New Hampshire governor do the same? Before we dive into specifically whether it could carry over to New Hampshire, which I think would take a pretty considerable political shift to happen here in Concord, fortunately. But it was scary to hear what the New Mexico governor was saying, that with regards to gun rights in Albuquerque, saying you're not allowed to carry a gun, and for very similar circumstances that we're hearing with regards to the environmentalists in Montana, where your right to have something is impeding on someone else, so we're going to entirely take away your constitutional right to bear arms. And she was blatant about it. She's like, it was a total mask off moment.
Totally unconstitutional. She's received quite a bit of backlash from what I can tell already. You and I, before we went on air, so to speak, we were talking about the genesis of the Second Amendment is an individual right. It's a personal right, and you can't supersede that with governmental executive fiat.
Yeah, and this is a quote from let's see, I don't know if it was, it was with the New York Times. I have emergency powers. Gun violence is an epidemic. Therefore, it's an emergency. Once again, the COVID thing. It's the same language.
Same thing. It's from the playbook. We'll probably see it raise its ugly head again in probably this time next year, I would guess, if I had the crystal ball. It's and plus too, it doesn't follow the science, so to speak, right? As with the mask, didn't follow the science. All states with constitutional carry are definitively more safe from gun violence. I just looked up the states that have constitutional carry right before. New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine do, so we're in good stead. And then pretty much most of the Midwest, except for Colorado and New Mexico, and most of the kind of Rust Belt, except for Illinois, and Michigan and Wisconsin and Minnesota. But although gun ownership in Michigan, I guess, is pretty prevalent. It's just a horrible decision. I don't think it will stop gun violence at all. I mean, I don't know New Mexico's history of gun violence. I'm not really sure. But, I think the original question was, could Concord ever implement it? The fact that we're a constitutional carry state, and let's face it, even Bernie Sanders in Vermont, he was pro Second Amendment. You know why? Because it was beneficial to him being elected. So, I mean, that's kind of a third rail issue. It's a third rail issue, and it's most of my friends that I retired from the Army, they own guns, and they own lots of guns, and there is absolutely no way they're ever going to be confiscated, and absolutely no way their rights are ever going to be impinged. It's just this 400 million guns out there. It's just not logistically possible. So
yeah. I mean, if they had some stats to show that one state that's democratically operated has made a shift in some way, hey, guess what? Especially for Chicago, California, New York, like they've had these laws on the books forever. It has done jack to fix it. I'm a centrist. I'm more than happy. Like, I've entertained the concept of red flag laws and various things like that, which we won't probably get into too much about right now. But I've entertained these ideas because, hey, maybe there's some way of fixing this huge issue we have with regards to mass shootings and such in this country, because it's a problem. I'm the last person to say it's not a problem. But there's no evidence of any fixes because we're not addressing the root causes of the shootings. There's a reason why people are doing it. Obviously the mental health card is something Republicans throw around all the time, but it's a very valid card, and fortunately Republicans aren't doing jack to once again fix the root cause of the issue.
No, I mean, I grew up in Laconia, and Laconia was famous for its state school. And, we used to, unfortunately, institutionalize people who had severe mental health issues. And I'm not saying Laconia State School is a particularly nice place. It wasn't a particularly nice place. But that doesn't mean that you throw out the baby with the bathwater. Maybe there is a compromise. Maybe there is a way, because it is a mental health issue, I think. I think mental health, to bring it back to COVID at the beginning of your discussion, that two things have come out of it. The severe mental health issue and the severe dependency on drugs and alcohol. And I mean, the world isn't a perfect place. We're not. But it doesn't make sense to take someone like me or you that are law-abiding citizens and take away our rights that are guaranteed under our founding documents and say, well, that's a solution for it. And I think there is a misnomer. There are more gun laws than we need, to be honest with you, just like there's more immigration laws than we need. It's funny, with immigration, we don't like to enforce it. And with gun, we over-enforce it, right? But, the issue is we need to develop better mental health. But I don't know. Like, would mental health programs have, stopped any of the mass shootings that you can think of? Like, I think of Las Vegas. I don't know if mental health things, the guy was kind of in quiet obscurity and no one ever really heard of him, and so it's sad. We just got to create a more healthier country, and having government be big brother isn't a way to a healthier country. Name one problem government has solved.
Zip. Right. As I wave my yellow and black flag around all over the place.
Right. I mean, the only thing we've done reasonably well is we had a great military. It's because we overfund it. We overfund it, and we place an importance, and we dedicate a lot of resources to it. But we're even screwing that up now. So, it's a complicated issue, but I don't think Concord's ever going to, certainly under this governor, I don't think he's going to do that. He's going to allow that to happen. By the way, I've met the governor several times, but I saw him last week at a dedication to a friend of mine's son who died in Iraq, and the governor gave a great speech about that. He was very on point, very sympathetic, and it was a very nice ceremony. It was very nice. You can really tell he cares about things like that.
All right. Keith No of Lando Anastasi, thank you so much for joining me.
You're very welcome, AJ.
LAlaw.com to check out more from the firm. They do great work down there in Boston and all over the world, so definitely a great firm to check out. This has been the New England Take. Please like and subscribe down in the YouTubes. Be sure to find us on all your favorite podcast platforms. You get the show early at 5 a.m., usually Tuesdays and Thursdays. We maybe a couple Fridays sometimes, depending on my schedule, because this is I'm recording this after work at 5:30 at night. So please be sure to follow the show. We have a lot more exciting things coming up. Politics, policy, and life in New England, thenewenglandtake.com. Talk to you soon.